lead researcher, BudgIT Uche joins me now in our Lagos studio for more on this discussion. Good to have you join us, Ojugo. Now, let's start off with talking about fiscal sustainability of states, issues around weak economies of states, mostly tied to informal trade, skeletal industrial output. Tell us, what is our current reality?
Yes. So before we really dive into that, I want to quickly mention that where we started BudgIT is from really state, subnational and national data transparency, right? And why is that important? Why do I mention this now? Because we can only enrichen our knowledge and our understanding, deepen our understanding of where states actually are based on what is available and what is put out there. Right? Where before we've been using budgeted figures to understand recurrent expenditure, we realize that states are not always realistic in their budgets. So with the increasing fiscal transparency landscape, where we now have more and more audited reports, we are actually able to now, for example in this, look at what states are actually spending. But now to get more directly into your question, what we see is that between 2017 and 2018, kind of on a aggregate level, right? States internally generated revenue as a whole increased by 25%, right? That from 936 billion in 2017 to 1.17 in 2018, according to information from the National Bureau of Statistics, right? So there is that, rise in internally generated revenue, which is key, right? Which is extremely key to being sustainable. But when we look at the makeup, what that makes up of the total revenues that states have, it's still a low 31%.
There's a deficit.
There's still a low 31%. So basically, what that means is that states are making strides in terms of data transparency, in terms of increasing their IGR, but where it is it's not where it needs to be.
Okay, talking about where it needs to be as well, establishing single investment products, that's one of the biggest challenges of states. We've seen instances where it somewhat seems like the states don't understand their resources and channeling their investment within that area as well. How does this affect a sustainable line of growth?
Yeah. So I mean, without a doubt, in order to to make strides in sustainability, right, increasing one's internally generated revenue is key, and states can do that, and some states are doing that by focusing on where they have competitive advantage. Where they can increase their production, internally generated revenues, so that they can be at a higher and stronger position. However, there are some challenges, some very real challenges that states face in terms of attracting the type of investment that they need to. Some of those challenges, and very understandably so, some of those challenges include, right, if you're going to attract someone to your state, first of all, you need to make sure that that person can still scale through and actually come into Nigeria to begin with. So usually what that means is that the circle of people that you're looking at to invest in you are people that have already come into the market.
And
right?
State by state, we also have contextual challenges, unique, peculiar to each state.
Precisely. However, states are not able to translate those peculiarities in a way that to adequately attract investment for their states. What do I mean by this? So we have, usually in other countries, subnational entities are often able to attract companies to invest in their own particular state as opposed to, say, another state by offering, tax incentives. But the biggest bulk of the tax, the corporate income tax, is collected and controlled by the national government.
Level.
Exactly, at the national government, at the national level. So states have little leeway therefore, to then, create incentives that can, on that level at least, that can attract.
And talking about sustainability now, your report, the state of states, looking at fiscal sustainability, we look at Lagos, which has the capacity to generate about 263 billion naira when we are talking about IGR, and doing a comparative analysis with something like a state like Osun State, 20 billion naira. it would be unfair to say we are comparing all of these at a go, but what was different in your approach, talking about methodology, your data collection method, and how realistic does this interpret what we have on the table now for states? So that, because everybody knows data is big and it is what we present ourselves with that we work with, isn't it?
Precisely. So I think here you hit on 2 points. I'll take them one after the other. So in terms of the reality on ground and using that information, that is where this 2019 State of States slightly deviates from the previous ones that we've been able to do, we've done. So as I mentioned very briefly, but I'll go into a bit more detail. As I mentioned briefly, this year in 2019, because we were able to get access to state financials, to state audited financials for all 36 states, we then use that as opposed to
real-time figures.
Precisely, at least for the internally generated revenue and for their recurrent expenditure. Because a lot of what we do is we look at the recurrent expenditure and the state's ability to meet that recurrent expenditure, right? However, because states don't always publish them on time, we had to kind of go a bit back and therefore use figure from real audited statements from 2017. However, it gives a more realistic picture than if we were using budgeted recurrent expenditure. And then speaking to kind of the disparity we see among states, definitely there are wide disparities. We have a state like actually out of all 36 states, it's interesting to know that only 2, Lagos State and Ogun, have their internally generated revenue constituting a higher percentage of the total intake.
But let me button here now. Yeah. When we also talk about Osun State generating as much as low as 20 billion naira. Now, this is a state that has vast land, known for cocoa production. We've seen a decline in the production level. They have minerals. So do you think at state level, the governors, the economic teams there still understand what it means to utilize their areas of comparative advantages?
Yeah, I mean, I think that depends on the state, right? But I definitely think that there are states that are making real strides. But also the challenge, number one,
let's forget about Lagos and Rivers and Delta, Akwa Ibom State. They are fair and fine. Talk about Benue, Imo, Osun.
Yeah, and also note that number one, the challenges are real, and also it takes time, right? Even if you have, say, a visionary leader, a visionary governor, it's not internally generated revenue does not happen. Increasing that doesn't happen overnight, right? Because it's about investments that have to yield figures. And you even mentioned, so you mentioned and you reference states that are doing well relative to others, but it is also, and I think that's fair, right? They are, but it's also important to note that when we look at one of our key indices, which is states' ability to meet their recurrent expenditure, right? To address those needs of theirs, without relying on the broad federal allocation, right? So using their internally generated revenue, using the VAT allocation, we include that because value is added at all levels, and also the 13% derivation. We saw that only 3 out of 36 states, right, were actually able to meet their recurrent expenditure with what you could call state-owned resources. However, all those 3 states, right, are oil-producing states, right? So what that means is that they also get a 13% share of oil derivation, which is not to say that they are not to be lauded. No, because there are other oil-producing states that are doing way worse. But that also gives a sense to the fact that there are states where the resources just haven't been developed in, and it takes time.
And it takes time. Well, but let's talk about another reality we experience at state level, which mirrors what we also have at the national level. The ratio between our recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. That disparity is unnecessarily high, but we've seen success stories like Kano as well as Lagos State. Talking about the Lagos State budget, what cues should we also be taking and replicating at other state levels?
So I mean, I think it's great you mentioned the Lagos State budget, which was presented last last week. And what we're seeing there is there's definitely a higher prioritization of capital expenditure, right? Where before it was 55% of the budget, now it's 62% of the budget for capital expenditure. However, I think it's also important to know that in that document, right, in the presentation of the budget, it was also mentioned that the track record for capital expenditure delivery and capital expenditure performance has not historically been high. So where previously in 2019, less than half of the capital expenditure budget figure has actually been spent. But it's great that that was mentioned, right, and mentioned as an area of improvement and an area where Lagos wants to kind of push forward. So basically, what I want to why I raised that is because I think it's great to see greater prioritization of capital expenditure in budget documents. However, we also have to continue to push and to inquire beyond the budget document at what the actual spend then is. And
as we are wrapping up conversations now, just before I let you go, let's talk about our monetary and fiscal economic policy direction. Some have said, economic watchers have said, we don't necessarily have a clear-cut direction or clarity. Would you say that as well at national level?
I guess I would ask more questions about those that say we don't have a clear cut. In what particular areas?
Okay, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Rodrigo Uche, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And